My name is Celine Vayler. I am 30 years old. A few weeks ago, I heard my own father say something very hurtful about me. I was standing in the hallway holding a mug of coffee when I heard him talking in the living room. His voice was sharp, cold, and very serious. He said, "Your brother's new in-laws are very fancy. You will embarrass us. Do you understand, Celine? Don't ruin this." He didn't speak to me like I was his daughter. He spoke to me like I was a problem he needed to manage. My brother had just gotten engaged to a very rich woman, the kind of woman you see in fancy hotel magazines. Suddenly my life, my messy little life in Austin, where I worked with numbers and computers, was seen as a threat to their perfect image. They didn't care that I spend my nights rebuilding hotel booking systems and helping hotels earn more money. To them, I was just the awkward girl who asks too many questions at dinner and never knows which fork to use. While they packed designer clothes for a big New Year's Eve party at a luxury resort, I was told to stay home. I was supposed to keep things simple. They didn't want me at the party. They didn't want me near the fancy people. And they definitely didn't want anyone knowing I was part of the family. What they didn't know was that those same fancy in-laws had already been working with me for months. They didn't know it was me because I was working under a different name. They trusted my skills, my numbers, and my ideas to save their business. And on the night they tried to hide me, those in-laws ended up staring at a framed photo, recognizing me, and screaming my name in front of everyone. Have you ever felt like your family thinks you are embarrassing, only to find out you are actually the one in control? That is exactly what happened to me. Stay with me, because the way this party turned from humiliation to triumph is a story you will want to hear until the very end. I did not grow up thinking I was embarrassing. As a kid, I just knew I was different. While other kids at family barbecues ran around playing games, I would sit at the little plastic table, counting how many hot dogs people took and wondering why Uncle Orrin always left early. I asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. Why do you spend money on that company if they owe so much? Why do you say we're fine with money if mom works 2 jobs? People would laugh at first, but soon they stopped talking to me. My parents, Corvin and Leora Vayler, would pull me aside afterward. "Celine, can you please just be normal for once? Smile. Talk about school. Don't interrogate people." My older brother Kalen, on the other hand, was everything they wanted. He knew exactly when to laugh, when to compliment someone's watch, when to ask about golf. He knew how to act so everyone would like him. I remember one high school graduation dinner. I was standing too close to the waiter, asking about tips, and I accidentally bumped into a tray of marinara sauce. It spilled all over a guest's white dress. The whole table went silent. My mother's face turned red, just like the sauce. My father grabbed my arm hard and whispered, "This is exactly what I mean. You don't belong in these fancy parties." After that, I stopped trying to fit in at these kinds of parties. Instead, I buried myself in numbers. In high school, I taught myself spreadsheets just for fun. In college, while other people were posting pictures from parties, I was running tests on tiny hotel websites to help them get more guests. I discovered that I could take messy data and turn it into answers that worked. Hotels and guest houses started coming to me with problems. Too many empty rooms, not enough guests. I would sit in my dorm room at 3 in the morning, staring at charts and graphs, changing prices, and tweaking ads until the numbers finally went up. Back home in Austin, none of this seemed to matter to my parents. When I told them I landed my first client, my mother smiled politely and said, "So you're still doing that online thing?" My father waved it off. "It's just temporary. She'll get a real job eventually." Kalen went straight into law, joined a big law firm, and became the golden boy. When I showed up to family dinners after a long day working from my bedroom in my pajamas, my mother whispered, "Could you at least pretend you're not working from your bedroom?" At some point, something in me changed. If my family was never going to see my value in the room, I would build it quietly somewhere else. I registered my own small consulting business, Vayler Analytics, and I started saying no to parties where I knew I would be the punchline. I chose data over dinner tables, dashboards over polite small talk. While my parents were busy polishing Kalen's image, I was slowly learning something they had no idea about. Numbers can change the future of an entire company. But I wondered, what would happen if my numbers collided with their obsession over status? The first time Ravencourt and Vale came into my life, it was because someone else was desperate. I was in my apartment one sticky Austin afternoon, half asleep over a spreadsheet, when I got an email. "Urgent, mid-size resort chain in trouble. Can you help?" A small agency I had worked for before was panicking. Their client, a fancy hotel, had very few guests after the pandemic. They needed someone who understood numbers to fix it fast. That client was Ravencourt and Vale Resorts. At that moment, it was just a logo and a name on a screen. A few hours later, my phone rang. "This is Dorian Ravencourt," said a calm but tired voice. "We've been told you can pull numbers out of the fire. Can you dive into our systems and tell us what's wrong?" I should have felt intimidated, but instead I felt clear. This was just a bigger version of the same puzzle I had been solving for years. I asked for access to their booking system, ad accounts, and website analytics. Within days, I was combing through years of numbers, spotting problems no one else had noticed. Their prices didn't change with demand. Their ads were targeting the wrong people. Their website was losing potential guests because the booking form was confusing and hard to use. I built a plan. We tested dynamic pricing, changing room rates slightly based on season and how many people were searching. We turned off useless ads and redirected the money into better ones, targeting the right audience. I created special packages for weekend travelers, remote workers, and families who wanted short trips nearby. It was risky, and I told Dorian that. He paused, then said, "If your numbers are right, we have nothing left to lose. Do it." For the first round of tests, I even put some of my own consulting fee on the line. If I failed, I would make almost nothing. If it worked, both of us would win. After the first month, the numbers moved a little. After the second month, they shot up. Booking rates climbed, revenue followed, and even the board stopped worrying. Dorian called me one evening, sounding lighter than I had ever heard him. "You have no idea what you've done for us, Celine. Our team is putting together a case study wall at our main resort to celebrate the turnaround. We want your face on it, your name, everything." I laughed and told him I preferred to stay behind the scenes, but I sent over a professional headshot just in case. On the internal mock-up they sent me, my photo sat in a gold frame with the title, Data and Growth Strategist, Celine Vale. I closed the file before I could think too much about it. To me, it was just one more quiet win that no one at home needed to know about. What I didn't realize then was that this same revived resort chain would soon host a glittering charity gala. And at that gala, my polished older brother Kalen would meet a woman named Isolde Ravenscourt, the millionaire heir my parents would fall in love with long before they accepted me. Kalen called me about 3 months after that first big turnaround for Ravencourt and Vale. His voice was bright in a way I recognized from every time he thought he was leveling up. "Hey, you free to grab coffee? I have news." We met at a sleek downtown cafe, the kind of place with concrete floors and overpriced coffee. He walked in wearing a tailored suit, even though it was Saturday. That easy smile plastered on his face told me before he said a word that the news would make our parents very, very proud. "I'm engaged," he said, dropping the word between us like it was a trophy. "To Isolde Ravencourt." And just like that, the golden boy had won the approval he always wanted, and my parents had another reason to ignore my quiet victories. But little did they know, the very woman they loved for Kalen had been quietly trusting me to save her family's hotels. The name hit me like a glitch in my brain. "Harrington, as in Ravencourt and Vale?" I asked carefully. "Yeah," Kalen said, his eyes shining like he was proud of himself. "Her family owns a very fancy hotel and resort business. They have huge buildings with glittering lights, sparkling pools, and elegant decorations everywhere. They throw big charity parties, fancy balls, and important events for politicians all the time." Dad was freaking out, but in a happy, excited way. I tried to smile. I had spent months helping fix the money and numbers for that company. I had worked so hard that their business was no longer in trouble. But with Kalen, I always felt like I was 10 steps behind. He was always showing the world the picture he wanted them to see, and I was stuck trying to catch up. "That's great," I said, trying to sound happy. "I'm happy for you." We talked about the proposal, the ring, and how our parents had reacted. Of course, they were thrilled. This was the kind of connection they had always dreamed of. The kind of life they always read about in magazines and saw on TV. They imagined big parties, expensive gifts, and a life full of glittering lights and famous people. But then Kalen's expression changed. It was like he had been saving the hard, uncomfortable part for last. "So," he said, "there's going to be a New Year's Eve engagement party." He traced the rim of his cup with his finger, sitting at one of Isolde's family resorts. "It's going to be huge," he said. "Her parents are inviting donors, business people, and even some politicians. It's going to be a very fancy, important event." I nodded, waiting for the part where he would ask if I needed help with flights, a hotel room, or picking a dress. But instead, he cleared his throat and said something that made my stomach turn cold. "Look, Celine," he said slowly. "I think it's better if you don't come." I stared at him. "Don't come?" I asked. "It's your engagement party." "It's a very special crowd," he said. "Ila's parents, they're friends. They're used to a certain kind of manners and behavior. You know how you get in those situations." "How do I get?" I asked sharply, feeling my heart pound. He lifted his hands like he was defending himself. "You ask heavy questions. You make people uncomfortable. You don't really play the game. Dad thinks it might be too stressful for you." "Too stressful for me, or too embarrassing for you?" I asked. He flinched. That told me everything I needed to know. "Kaylin, I work with hotels and resorts for a living," I said. "I know more about the kind of people you're trying to impress than you do." But he kept talking. "We only get one chance to make a first impression with Isolde's family. They are elite, Celine. They're used to certain manners and certain appearances. Mom and Dad are already nervous. They think it's safer if you don't come." "Safer?" I laughed, but it came out flat. "So I'm not invited to my own brother's party because I don't fit the picture?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "It's not like that," he muttered. "We'll have a smaller family dinner later. Just us. You know I love you, right? This is just a strategy." When I got home, my parents were whispering in the living room. Their voices were low but urgent. I stopped in the hallway unseen. "Your brother's in-laws are elite," Dad was saying. "We can't risk Celine talking about money or pointing out mistakes. She'll embarrass us." Leora sighed. "She doesn't mean to, Tom. But this could be Kaylin's big chance. We can't let her ruin it." The words hit me harder than a slap. Upstairs, my laptop was still open on the company dashboard, Ravencourt and Vale, the same name that would be on Kaylin's fancy invitations. They were scared I would embarrass them in front of the very people whose money I had helped save. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Fine, I thought. If they want to hide me, let them. They have no idea how small their story really is. They think this party is the most important thing. They don't know that, somewhere in the middle of all the champagne and glitter, my work is already part of their world, waiting to shake up their perfect little plan. New Year's Eve came faster than I wanted it to. The week between Christmas and December 31st felt like limbo, like the world was holding its breath. My parents were buzzing around the house, talking about flights, outfits, and what kind of gift would be proper for the Ravencourts. Kaylin sent me a picture of the invitation once. All gold letters and fancy embossing. "Wish you could come," he wrote, as if it hadn't already been decided that I couldn't. On the morning of the party, I watched them leave for the airport. Mom wore a new dress she couldn't really afford, and Dad adjusted his tie like it was very expensive, even though it wasn't. They waved, and I waved back from the doorway. The beautiful daughter who had been told to stay home for her own good. When the Uber pulled away, the house went quiet. The quiet felt heavy, like a weight pressing on my chest. That night, the city glittered with fireworks and rooftop parties, but I stayed in my apartment with takeout and my laptop open on the coffee table. I tried to turn on a movie, but my phone kept lighting up. Photos from Mom of the resort lobby dripping with chandeliers. Videos from Kaylin of champagne towers, a live band, and people dancing in fancy clothes. Isolde walking down a big staircase in a silver gown like she had stepped out of a magazine. In one clip, I could hear Dad in the background saying, "That's my son up there. He's marrying into the Ravencourt family." I stared at the screen until the images blurred. They were inside the world they had always wanted, and they had done everything to make sure I was nowhere near it. So I closed the photos and opened a different window, the company's analytics dashboard. Real-time numbers flickered across the screen, showing bookings pouring into the same resorts my brother was celebrating at while they smiled for pictures. The numbers I had helped improve were now bonuses and parties for people who would never know my name. Then, an email notification popped up in the corner of my screen. Subject line: Year-end update and a special request. It was from Dorian Ravencourt. I clicked it open, expecting just a small thank you. But he had written a whole paragraph about how amazing the past year had been, how I had changed everything for the better. "You didn't just tweak a few ads, Celine," he wrote. "You changed the way we understand our business. We want to honor that properly." At the bottom was an attachment labeled, Concept Wall of Innovation JPG. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was a mock-up of the entrance to one of their resorts. A long wall lined with framed pictures and descriptions of projects. Near the center was my headshot, a clean, confident photo. Beneath it, a plaque read, Data and Growth Strategist Celine Vailer. The description summarized all the work I had done, changing pricing, running campaigns, helping the company recover after the pandemic slump. Dorian wrote, "We plan to show this at a big event soon. We would love to finally meet you in person and introduce you to the people whose jobs you helped save." I held my fingers over the keyboard. On my phone, another photo came in from Mom. Kaylin and Isolde cuddled under a shower of confetti. My parents were blurred in the background, smiling. I imagined that wall might exist somewhere in the same building. My framed photo silently proving them wrong, that I wasn't a disappointment. I replied to Dorian with a simple, professional yes. I'd be honored to attend. Then I put my phone face down, leaned back on my couch, and listened to the distant echo of fireworks outside. They thought they had erased me from this night, but the truth was sitting right there on my laptop screen in a gold frame. My name was already part of the world they had tried to hide me from. The months after that New Year's Eve felt like someone had quietly turned up the brightness on my life. My family kept acting like I was still sitting in the dark, but I wasn't. Ravencourt and Vale signed more contracts, pulling me into meetings about new resorts, expansions, and even buying other properties. I was suddenly on calls about resorts in California and the Caribbean. I ran tests to see what would happen if they changed prices in certain months. I made plans for new campaigns and watched numbers change in real time. My days blurred into dashboards and strategy decks, the kind of work that people in my world dream about. My bank account felt it too. I traded my old hatchback for a reliable hybrid. I finally fixed the leak in my bathroom. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment that didn't feel like it might collapse during a thunderstorm. I did all of this quietly. No big announcements. No social media posts. I knew exactly how my parents would react. They would smile, nod, and ask if I had thought about applying for a normal office job. Meanwhile, Kaylin's life looked like a highlight reel. Mom sent me constant updates. Photos of him and Isolde at fancy parties and wine tastings, screenshots of articles mentioning the Ravencourt name, captions like, "Your brother was there last night." Over Sunday dinners, the conversation was always about wedding plans, guest lists, and how incredible it was that our family would soon belong to this fancy world. Once over meatloaf, Kaylin said, "Dorian is bringing in some genius consultant for their new data strategy. He's amazing with numbers. If I play this right, I could end up working on some big deals." I took a slow sip of water to hide my reaction. Mom looked impressed. "See, that's the kind of company you want to be around," she said. "People who know how to make things happen." I wondered what she would say if I told her the genius consultant had spent that morning arguing with Dorian about whether to limit hotel bookings during holidays to protect long-term brand value. And that genius? That was me. But I didn't say anything. Let them talk about being close to power. I was busy building it. One afternoon in early fall, an email came from Dorian's assistant. It made me sit up straighter. "We're finalizing details for the Partners and Family Gala at our Miami flagship," she wrote. "It's both a celebration of this year's turnaround and an engagement party for Miss Isolde Ravencourt and Mr. Kaylin Vaylor. Dorian and Maris are especially excited to honor you that evening. They'd like you front and center when we unveil the Wall of Innovation." Attached was the official invitation. Even through the screen, it felt heavy and important, gold and embossed. My name was at the top of the guest list under a part called Strategic Partners. My brother's name was further down under the family of the groom. I just stared at it for a long moment. I hadn't heard from my parents yet about this big event, but I could already imagine what they would say. They would brag about being invited to a very fancy New Year's party at Layla's favorite resort. They would talk about how special the guest list was, how only certain people could go, and somewhere between the speeches and the sparkling champagne, they would try to quietly leave me out again. But this time it was different. The Ravencourts weren't inviting me as Kaylin's shy sister. They were inviting me as Celine Vaylor, the person who had helped their business grow and succeed when things were really hard. I felt my chest tighten with a mix of excitement and nerves. I picked up the phone and called Dorian to double-check the details, keeping my voice calm. He sounded happy and excited, almost like he couldn't stop smiling over the phone. "We've been telling everyone about you," he said. "I can't wait to see their faces when they realize the person behind those numbers is real." I hung up the phone, leaned back in my chair, and let it sink in. My family had spent a whole year trying to hide me from their perfect story, thinking I would embarrass them in front of their fancy relatives. But at this party in that shiny resort, no one could hide me. My face would be there the moment they walked in a golden frame with my name on it. They thought they were going to a world where I didn't belong. They didn't know that world had already been mine, long before they even stepped into it. The Raven Court Resort in Miami looked exactly like the kind of place my parents dreamed about when they looked at fancy magazines. Marble floors that shined under the lights, huge palm trees in enormous pots, and elegant flower decorations that probably cost more than my first car. The chandeliers sparkled like they had captured pieces of the sun. The night of the party, the air felt warm and full of energy. The staff wore crisp, perfect uniforms and moved gracefully, guiding guests toward the big ballroom like they were part of a dance. I arrived early just like they asked, not as Kaylin's sister, but as one of the strategic partners. A coordinator came up to me and handed me a badge with my name printed clearly in black letters. Celine Vayler, Data and Growth Strategist. Seeing it made my chest feel funny, like a mix of pride and surprise. For the first time, my name and my work were being recognized, not just she does something on the computer. I felt like I finally had a place where my work mattered. Inside the lobby, there was a wall of innovation along one side. Gold frames, soft lights, each frame showing a story of how the company had survived very hard times. And there, near the center, was my frame. My photo, my name, my work. I could see the little plaque below it that told everyone exactly what I had done. Dorian and Maris came over, all smiles and warm energy. They introduced me to board members, department heads, and people whose jobs depended on the decisions I had helped make. For the first hour, I completely forgot about my family. I talked about numbers, future plans, and laughed at a CFO's joke about forecasting. I felt confident, alive, and proud. I was exactly where I belonged. Then I heard my mom's voice. It came from the lobby, high and nervous. "Oh, this place is wow. Kaylin, look at that chandelier." I turned just enough to see them enter. My dad wore a suit that suddenly looked cheap under the bright chandeliers. My mom clutched her bag tightly, like it might run away. Kaylin and Isolde walked ahead, looking like they belonged there perfectly. My first instinct was to hide, to step behind someone taller. But the staff already knew who I was. One of them smiled at me. "Ms. Vayler, can we get you near the wall? Mr. Ravencourt wants you to close for the announcement." So instead of hiding, I stood just a few feet from my own framed photo as my family crossed the foyer. They didn't see me at first. Their eyes were on the fancy decorations, the guests, and the promise of this special night. Maris tapped her champagne glass to get everyone's attention. Conversations quieted down. "Thank you all for being here," she began. "Tonight is about family and partnership, about the people who helped this company when things were very hard." She pointed to the wall. "Over the last year, we built this to remind ourselves that numbers aren't just charts. They're people. People who changed everything when we needed it most." She stepped closer to my frame, smiling warmly. "One of those people is someone very special to us now. She is Celine Vayler." For a moment, it felt like the floor tilted beneath me. My parents froze. Kaylin snapped his head toward the sound of my name. Maris read the plaque out loud. "Data and Growth Strategist, the mind behind the turnaround that kept these resorts alive when travel was at its worst. You have no idea how often we've said her name this year." Then she looked at me, following the line from the frame to where I stood. My mom's eyes went wide, like she had just realized something very important. "Celine," she said, then louder, full of surprise and delight. "Celine Vayler, you're here. You're Kaylin's sister." People around them turned to look at me, then at Kaylin, then at my parents. The silence said more than any speech could. Dorian stepped up beside Maris and looked at my family with polite but sharp seriousness. "You never told us your daughter was our Celine," he said to my parents. Corvin opened his mouth. "Shut it." He looked like he wanted to disappear. My mom stammered. We didn't know you knew her like that. She does some kind of computer work. We didn't think it was important for tonight." Nearby guests exchanged surprised looks. Dorian said slowly, "Important? Without her, this party doesn't happen. This building doesn't stay this full. Half the people in this room would be updating their resumes if it weren't for her work." Maris laughed lightly, trying to soften the tension, but her words carried weight. "We've been bragging about her for months. I can't imagine hiding someone like Celine." Kaylin looked pale. He looked at me like I had done something wrong just by existing. "Celine," he whispered when he finally reached me, "you didn't tell me you were working with them." I held his gaze. "You didn't ask," I said. Later, away from the crowd, my parents cornered me in a quiet hallway. My mom's voice shook. "You made us look foolish," she whispered. "We didn't know." I cut her off gently. I mattered to them. My work mattered. The girl they tried to hide had actually saved the day. My dad tried to recover some authority. You could have warned us, Celine. We would have prepared differently. I almost laughed. Prepared how? By inviting me this time? By pretending you were proud? Kalen stepped forward, his eyes glassy with emotion. Maybe we handled things wrong, he said. But you know how Mom and Dad are. We just wanted everything to go smoothly. You want to be part of this family. That was when I felt something inside me settle. I realized I had spent years twisting myself into knots, trying to fit in, chasing a version of belonging that always had rules. Don't say too much. Don't ask hard questions. Don't outshine the chosen star. I took a deep breath. I will always be your sister, I told Kalen. And I will always be their daughter. But I'm done begging to sit at a table where the price of admission is pretending I'm less than I am. I'm not going to shrink anymore so you can feel bigger. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Celine, we were just afraid, she said quietly. Afraid you'd embarrass us. I nodded. And tonight, you found out the only thing embarrassing was how little you believed in me. That's on you, not on me. Back in the ballroom, when Dorian introduced me on stage as a key partner, the applause felt different than any approval I had ever chased. It wasn't polite clapping from relatives who barely listened. It was people who had seen the results and cared about them. People who didn't care if I wore the wrong dress or asked funny questions as long as I helped them succeed. Standing there under the soft golden lights, I finally understood something I wish someone had told me years earlier. The most powerful revenge isn't being mean or dramatic. It's stopping giving your worth to people who don't see it. It's letting your success speak in rooms where they never thought your voice would be heard. It's refusing to make yourself smaller, so insecure people can feel taller. If your family ever made you feel like the extra one, the one who should hide so they could look good, hear this. Just because they don't see your value, it doesn't mean you have no value. You can build a life that shows who you really are. You can love your family but still say no when their expectations try to crush you. In the end, my parents had to walk past my framed photo every time they moved through the resort that night. My name, Celine Vaylor, etched into the wall of the world they admired. They were the ones shrinking, avoiding eye contact, practicing apologies. I just walked with my shoulders back, finally understanding the real glow-up wasn't getting their approval. It was learning to accept myself first. And that night, as the golden lights reflected on the marble floors, I realized something even bigger. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was important. I had already proven it, to them, to the world, and most importantly, to myself. My name wasn't just on a badge or a plaque. It was a story of courage, hard work, and never letting anyone dim my light. And no one, not even my family, could ever take that away from me.